Okay, we are going live, and we're live. All right. Yeah. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We have two great speakers here, Glenn and Jessica. Thank you for joining and putting in your time for this conference. Could you guys just introduce yourselves and a little bit about your backgrounds?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Jessica Monaghan. I'm part of Princeton University's teacher preparation program. I'm the assistant director of STEM, and in that role, I support a lot of the STEM students, co-teach courses on, designing instructional units and working with students with special needs, working with families, things like that, as well as previously I was a K-12 science supervisor and middle school science teacher. And in that respect, I did a lot of work on curriculum assessments, project-based learning, problem-based learning. That kind of is the nutshell, but I'm happy to share more once we get into the questions.
Okay, cool.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Yes. Okay. All good. I guess I'll go next. My name is Glenn Fajardo. I am an educator, consultant, and author. I've been teaching at the Stanford D School since 2014, known as kind of like the virtual distributed remote guy for many years. And then all of a sudden in 2020, that became very handy. And so last year I was a teaching fellow at the D School, helping other instructors craft virtual learning experiences. I've been working on the problem of virtual collaboration for the last 13 years. I started when George W. Bush was president. That's how long ago it's been. But the reason why is I've been working with social change makers around the world across 6 continents. And I really care very deeply about this idea of how can we think together? How can we collaborate together? How can we be creative together when we're far apart? So I also recently published a book. It's called Rituals for Virtual Meetings. And yeah, very happy to be here today and look forward to the session.
Awesome. Thanks, Glenn. That's really cool. And Godwyn, could you introduce
Godwyn. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, there. So the only thing I don't know how to do is change the U to my name, but otherwise I know how to use Hopin. Do you know how to change?
We can see your name, all right?
You see my name?
Yes.
Okay. All right. On my screen, it says you. Do you guys have that too?
Okay.
Never mind. Do you want an overview of who I am and why I'm here?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay. So my name is Godwyn Morris, and I run a makerspace in New York City and a hands-on learning program for teachers and for children. And my focus for actually many years has been hands-on learning, and we've always done things with paper. But for this year, we've really narrowed in on that, and we do something called engineering with paper. And we've created an entire curriculum using just paper, tape, and scissors, so that everybody could do hands-on projects at home without having to get kids any supplies. And we make wheel and axle, we make parachutes, we make all kinds of things. And I've had 4 projects published in the New York Times this year. So that was very exciting. They found us and loved what we were doing. And so we designed our projects, how to make them out of newspaper. And so if you go to the New York Times website and you type in my name and you spell my name right with the Y, you'll see all of our projects. But anyway, that's been my focus the whole year. I do a lot of teacher training. I do a lot of conference presentations. This is my second one just today, and I have a third one after this is over. Just today happened to be a popular conference day. But here's an example of a catapult that we make, and we do things. Our main focus is shapes, is teaching teachers and then teaching kids just learn how to make some basic shapes. Cylinders, this is a paper track. We make rectangular prisms. I was doing the workshop earlier, so I have my samples. Just making basic shapes and then doing STEM challenges based on that. Is that
awesome? That's really cool, and I'm sure our audience will have the chance to learn a lot from you all and your different perspectives and your different backgrounds. And we think that a panel where there's so many different perspectives is going to be very conducive to our theme for this conference, which is what will learning look like in a post-COVID classroom. And so the first question that I have for you all is, why did you choose to go into education? And this isn't really COVID related, more just for more background, I guess.
That's a big topic. I mean, that's sort of like one of those general. The impact, just the impact. Look how many people you can meet, you can reach, you can possibly help them improve their future. Whether it's the teachers, because we do a huge amount now with teachers, and just watching teachers learn how to do things in a new and different way, and knowing that will then be passed on to kids. So education is just constantly and forever exciting in that way.
Awesome.
I'll say for me, it's kind of evolved over time. So initially getting into teaching, it was kind of seeing those students' aha moments and when something clicked. And then in teaching, trying to continue and move towards that teacher leadership role, it was finding opportunities to empower students in their learning and having them take over and really have that student-driven kind of problem-solving type of learning experience where they're picking what they care about. And then beyond that, it's just kind of how do we get larger groups of people, larger groups of students involved in their own learning and kind of making meaning and making sense of things. Then it extends to the community. So in my role as science supervisor, part of that was having students lead learning with their families and being able to connect to the community at large. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. And I think just to kind of offer a more selfish take, I'll do that. So I got into education because actually there's the selfish part and there's the selfless part. The selfish part is just I love to learn, and I love to learn with other people. And so teaching and education is a great forum to do that. And then the selfless part is I've just been really fortunate to have a bunch of teachers and mentors, my parents and other people who have helped me along the way. And so going into education is a way for me to kind of pay it forward and just be thinking about how we could advance humanity.
Awesome. I think that all of those are very unique perspectives, and also, thank you for sharing, I guess, your individual stories and how, you sort of got into education. I guess, more specifically now, if you were to pick one aspect of remote learning that you really like or appreciate, what would you pick and why? And I think this question is important, not because remote learning is necessarily a good thing, but because we in a post-COVID classroom, we want to take the best parts, or I guess parts of remote learning that have actually worked, and try to incorporate them in in-person classrooms. And we want to hear, I guess, your perspective on what do you think remote learning's benefits are, and if you could pick one, what would you say?
Well, we're sort of going in that order. I'll start it again. Well, one thing is access to kids in a wider range of locations. So I teach an after-school program and a camp program and out-of-school program. So I could reach children anywhere in the world. I'm not a classroom teacher. And then even if you are a classroom teacher, I know a lot. I've been listening to the sessions all day. People have kids who are all over the world. So that aspect of it means that you can have the kids included even if they're not physically in the room with you. I have found that to be helpful and sort of interesting in many ways. You also can bring in outside people in a way that's fabulous. The Skyping in experts has found a whole new audience and a whole new function in this past year.
Yeah. Godwyn, I was going to say the same thing about accessibility, but from a different lens of thinking about the resources that are available. Those connections that you're talking about, bringing outside resources in. Totally agree with being able to take virtual field trips. There's been a lot more that's free and accessible in that way. The other piece I think that's important is students' accessibility to resources as they're learning, right? If something sparks in the moment, they can go immediately Google that. That doesn't have to be something that they write down and remember to go look up later, or, don't have time because there's constraints in the classroom. It's kind of that freedom and autonomy that they have over their own space and learning experience.
Yes, totally agree too. With the accessibility and especially being able to pull in different resources. I'd also add that one of the really, I think, interesting things about remote learning is it's forced us to kind of rethink our assumptions. and kind of being in a different space. I really think that what Jared said earlier about like last year, we can think of it as a lost year, we can think of it as a found year, and then kind of having to rethink our assumptions and seeing like how can we make class, the learning experience like more active? How can we involve more people? How can we find ways to make people feel more connected actually in different ways? And how can we build our vocabulary in a wider range of things? So I think there's a lot of benefits from remote learning. And when we combine it as one option versus like the only thing that we can do, then I think it's going to be kind of this really interesting, expansive vocabulary of education and learning going forward.
Right, absolutely. And just following up on that, what pieces of technology or programs do you think would be most useful to teachers when dealing with the situation? And this can be as specific or as general as you like, but off the top of my head, like a few things that I can think of are things like this platform, or maybe like when students have snow days, they utilize Zoom. So are there any programs or technologies that you've found particularly useful in that sense?
Well, the snow day one is kind of a funny example, because that's been the one big complaint that I've heard, is that kids, at least in the Northeast where I am, I'm in New York City, they've said we're not going to have snow days anymore. I mean, snow days are such a thrill. Yeah. So it's kind of a loaded one. But of course, just the fact that none of us knew what Zoom was or used it. It was used in business. Zoom didn't even know that they would be such a critical piece of the education piece. They weren't even ready for that. So it's just the entire shift that we are all totally comfortable now with this, which means we can do this cross, just like we're all meeting now. And, I've been part of Ignite STEM actually since you started, way before you guys were in school yet. So, I've really watched how you've adapted every year. And, I've been to the in-person, I presented at that. So the idea that we could just do this and in, a few days, here we all are, I think that's pretty clear. But the snow day one is a tricky one. So.
I'm kind of hesitant to name a tech tool or something that really enhances, but I mean, I think it's how you use it, right? It's it's what is your goal and what is the design purpose behind what you're doing, and how does the tech kind of then fit into that, right? I think picking the tech is one of the later things that you do after you design a good lesson, right? The tech itself doesn't replace the task or the goals. That being said, I will say I really like all the collaborative tools that help make students' thinking visible. So opportunities like Desmos for Math and Nearpod and Pear Deck, where students can interact and respond to the teachers, so they can have that sense of are they with me? Do they understand? Can I see what their thinking is right now? And Jamboard. So I would say tools that focus on making thinking visible and tools that help students collaborate with each other are just good pedagogy, right? And then the tools help that, they assist.
Yeah, I hate to keep on agreeing with people, but a big agreement with what both Godwyn and
you first next time, Glenn.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I love being the last person. I would really caution against making tech the cornerstone of what you're doing, and I think always remembering that tech is a tool, and you have to think about what is the human need that you're really serving, and what Jessica just said about making thinking visible is such a critical one. And I actually feel like I have more visibility into my students' thinking now than I've ever had. And so as examples of what we do, and again, these are not this is the solution to everything, but just to give concrete examples, digital whiteboards in general, I think are properly used are a really great way to be to enhance, not only enhance collaboration, to make thinking visible and to make people feel more connected and like they matter. So I happen to use Mural, but that's the Mural or Miro, Jamboard, that whole class of digital whiteboard, I think is a really important one. The other thing is just thinking about tools that we use every day and thinking of them differently. For example, we use in my classes that I teach, we use WhatsApp, but we use it primarily for video messages, and then particularly for reflection. So that way we hear every single student's reflection of different lessons that they've learned in class. And not only do we get a sense of what's on their mind, but we also get a sense of their emotional valence. And then so like seeing the emotion that people have like in their reflection just gives me a whole different level of insight versus looking at something like something that somebody's written, which is also useful. It's also a very useful thing, but like thinking about like how can tech be used in ways that we can get sort of access to each other's thoughts and emotions in ways that we haven't been able to previously.
Right, absolutely. And I think the WhatsApp example is cool because, you know, things like that where, I mean, a lot of classrooms didn't even allow phones. And, you know, maybe that's something that'll change going forward. And that's one example, maybe, you know, like especially high school teachers can take out of this is, you know, increased willingness to allow technology in the classroom. So I definitely agree with you on that front. I guess one other question that came in, this was specific for Godwyn. Are teachers ever resistant to teaching new ways, such as the engineering with paper, or do you pick the teachers for your program?
No, I present at conferences all the time. I'm constantly trying to reach people. And I never have anybody resistant to it because I'm showing you how to take a single piece of paper and make a catapult out of it, or make a roller coaster or a car. We make paper cars. We've got a website. It's actually called Dazzling Discoveries. If you go to the dazzlingdiscoveries.com website, you'll see my engineering with paper. That's actually our trademark name. If you go to Instagram and look at engineering with paper, you'll see all the projects. You go to the New York Times and search my name, you'll see some of the projects. I've never had anybody resistant to it. Everybody loves it. I just did a session earlier today with the After School Association, and they were just thrilled to have hands-on. It's easy, it's accessible, it's made with materials you already have. So I'm happy to talk to anybody. I try as hard as I can to get this methodology out to everybody. I'm not part of a school. I'm not part of, I'm self-funded. So we charge for some of our packets, but we have a lot of free downloads on the website. We really want to get this method out. It's been fabulous. And I haven't found anybody who doesn't like it, honestly. It's easy and accessible. It works for teachers, works for kids.
Absolutely. Another question, and this is an anonymous question. The WhatsApp idea is cool. What about for students who do not have access to these technologies, like a phone or a computer? How can I get them involved with these projects? And anyone can feel free to answer that, but Glenn, maybe you can start us off this time.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important question. Like in terms of thinking about like access, I've worked with different students and young people across like 55 plus countries, and I think one thing is to first don't make assumptions in either direction. Don't assume that people do have it. Also, don't assume that people don't have it. And I've been kind of shocked at like just the use of WhatsApp is a great example where I thought like, okay, we're going to run this program with people like in 55 countries, and then somebody's going to have like an access problem for sure, and we just have to think about what's the backup. And it turned out no one did, and I was kind of surprised like that was the case. And the other people who did have kind of questions or concerns, like even I remember there's a young human rights activist in Tehran in Iran, and she is also visually impaired as well. And I was kind of flipped out that she sent me like a video message on WhatsApp coming from there. So like I think not making assumptions in other directions, and then the other thing to think about is like, what are different access points that people might have in terms of being able to communicate, whether it's, through not just your phone, but like computers or like the, libraries when people could access them with friends. You just have to think sort of creatively about like, what are the different access points that people might have available to them.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's this point, goes back to that idea of, designing for the classroom, and every design for like individual classrooms is specific to like the needs of the students, the resources that they have available to them. And that's why like this conference is kind of the theme is like, again, like design thinking and how can you specifically tailor your curriculum to your students?
Yeah, and I get to agree with Glenn this time. And I really appreciate his comment about assumptions. And I think, another piece is making sure that you do find out, right? Like from the get-go, you're gathering information about your students and their needs and what they have and what they don't have. And also involving them in that aspect of, can they problem solve? solutions to not having access with you, right? Like, can you provide support? Are there ways that they can be creative to do a different version of it? But I appreciate the comment about not making assumptions in either direction.
So what I'll add to that, I've been, as I said, doing these presentations and doing lots and lots and hearing about teachers. So there are still teachers, even in this country, where there are some areas like the Navajo reservation, and there are just some spots where the internet is still weak, but clearly that's been a focus of every single school. It's a focus of the Biden administration now to get internet to everybody. So hopefully what will come out of this past year is that critical need to get the internet out to at least, I mean, we can only deal with America, but at least to everybody here. It's been interesting to hear how teachers have managed that, but we're hoping for a better future in that, at least in that way, so that internet will be available for everyone everywhere.
Absolutely. And I definitely think we're moving in the right direction there from that front. So, and that acceleration will probably happen faster now than it has ever before. And the pandemic has only helped that. I guess one other question that someone's asked is, what's the favorite thing you've learned from teaching in the last few years? And if you could elaborate on that.
Go ahead, Glenn, you go first.
So I think one of the favorite things I've learned about teaching in the last few years is how well I've gotten to know students. And so like things like before, I think students would have been really uncomfortable, like what's happening there or something like that. Like that would have been like a somewhat strange behavior. But now it's just like this sort of normalized thing. And then having that kind of informality and being able to like, hey, I have a question. Oh, I have a thought. Like, and then being able to kind of exchange ideas very quickly has been one of the favorite things I've learned, that like everybody has different boundaries and different like things. You want to be respectful and not expect everybody to be the same in that regard. But the idea that you can actually I wouldn't say be friends with your students. I mean, that's also true that you can be friends with them, but it's more of like this informality of interaction that allows you to kind of think together outside of the classroom on a more regular basis.
Well, I'll say from this year, I think the relationship building is so important as well. Gathering information, and then, I've done a lot of kind of using the information in the classroom and tailoring it to student assets. So if I know that we're talking about something that's coming up that a student in the classroom has experienced, I'll bring them into the conversation and kind of highlight that area of expertise. So being able to know your students well enough to tap into their assets and interests, I think is really important. I appreciate that, Glenn.
Just trying to keep that joy going. I really think that's sort of the simplest thing to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the things that we've noticed, at least in our classrooms, is that this concept of relationships or friendships between the instructors and the students has kind of waned because, students don't turn their videos on when they're on Zoom, aspects like that. And so what have you guys done to maybe help keep that relationship alive, or continue to, almost be friends, or I guess some sort of mentor to your students, despite, not ever meeting them in real life, or something like that?
I want to say something about the word friends. I think what we're really saying is friendly versus friends. I mean, may be true with high school that is a little bit more, friends is more maybe an accurate word, but for elementary school, you want to be friendly, you want to be warm and engaging, you want to be caring, but you're not friends the same way you just wouldn't be friends, even in school, in real life, and in person you wouldn't, but you want to be very accessible. So I don't know if I answered your question, but go ahead. I think pass on to Jessica now.
I don't know. I want to come back to it.
Yeah, I think I appreciate Godwyn's point about like it's not exactly friends, and that's kind of I sometimes, and that's really helpful. Like I've had trouble kind of articulating it, but I think showing that you're paying attention and showing that you care, I think are two really critical things. And so a lot of times I'll specifically comment on like something that a student like wrote down or said or something like where it feels like, oh, somebody's actually like hearing what I heard or, you know, what I wrote, and like that there's somebody like on the other end that I matter. I think that's really important. And then also just making sure that you're asking students questions and not just kind of telling them what to do or like correcting them, I think is, and being curious about like where your students are at. I think it goes a really long way to kind of building that kind of trust where, like I could say to my student Cameron, like, hey, like your journal is completely blank. What's up with that? That's not going to be very helpful. But right. if I ask him like, oh, I'm really curious, like what kinds of thoughts you've been having, and you know, I'll comment that I haven't, you know, I noticed that there's nothing in your journal. But the more important thing is to express curiosity and what's on his mind, and to show that I care about what he thinks, and I care that he's learning something.
Oh, absolutely. And those are all things that, you know, I'm sure you guys do, you know, every day in your jobs today. And so, you know, a lot of respect for that. And hopefully we'll be out of this pandemic soon enough that these relationships start to become more real again. I guess like one other question that an Ignite STEM member actually had was, when does technology overwhelm the learning and get in the way? Like, where do we draw the line? Like a lot of times, you know, you can actually overwhelm your students with too much of this or too much of that. And so how do you learn where to draw the line and what's the distinction?
I think it's that feedback loop constantly and asking. And, you know, it's also really setting your goals intentionally and streamlining things. I think that's been one of the big takeaways, is how to streamline effectively so that you get the learning that you want to get through whatever tools necessary without making it too much about the tool. So I think it's setting really intentional goals, being upfront about the goals, and then asking for feedback as you go along the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, checking in. I mean, the kids will tell you if they're, you know, but I mean, partly they tune out. So if they don't do something, and you say, as long as you're open to asking, instead of telling, asking what's happening, what'd you think, how'd that go? Those open questions, the more asking you do and listening, the more you know about what you're doing. I'm going to interject a tiny little piece that so one of the things that I do when I work with teachers, this is a little bit of an aside, but it's this issue of questions and statements. And that as adults, we want to be polite, and we tend to ask when we mean a statement, and we tend to make statements when we mean a question.
Yeah.
And so very often adults will say to children, particularly, I mean, they say to each other, but we reinterpret, but you say, can you pick up the marker? Can you get your coat? Can you? That's a question, but the adult doesn't usually mean it as a question. They mean it as a statement. What they really mean is, please get your coat. Please pick up the marker. So I work with a lot of teachers, and I do a lot of teacher training. And that's one of the first things I talk about, because that distinction between the word can and please changes from a question to a statement. And then the reverse happens when kids are working on stuff. They'll say, well, you should do this, or you know, and adults tell them what to do. And that's when you should be asking. That's when you should say, what did you notice? What do you think? What might happen? What's another direction? What happens if you turn it in this way? Because sometimes you do have to give them a little bit of instruction without overwhelming them. So anyway, just putting in my 2 cents about my hyper focus on the question answer interaction. It has nothing to do with technology. It's just hopefully that's useful for somebody.
Yeah, that was useful for me, Godwyn, because I think it's one thing that I reinforce with our students is like, make sure when you're asking a question, and this is in the context of design classes, but make sure the question that you're asking is actually a question. Like that is, and then what is your intent behind that, I think is really important. And I think we could use an analogous thinking for being aware of when technology is overwhelming. Is I think this past year has really forced me to be super razor sharp on learning objectives as you teach. and just always coming back to like, okay, wait, what were we trying to do here? Like, what were we trying to do this in this 5 minute segment? And then is that happening? And if that's not happening, you don't have the feedback loop that Jessica mentioned, then you have like, okay, it's time to kind of adjust and iterate. If you have no idea whether the learning objective is being accomplished, that is not just a technology problem. That's like a teaching problem that we need to kind of work on.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And so it looks like we're almost wrapping up. But one last question I wanted to end with is, what's one piece of advice you would leave this panel with today for all of our teachers in attendance? This can be, as casual or as formal as you'd like, but any closing comments or remarks that you had? And maybe Jessica, or go ahead.
Mine is just keep talking to each other. So this is a fabulous conference. As I said, I've been part of Ignite STEM for a long time. There's also ed camps and UnConferences all the time. And if you go to Eventbrite and search UnConference or ed camp, you will see dozens of these sort of informal opportunities to converse with educators, with each other. And they're free, and they're just they pop up all the time. There's a formal organization called Ed Camp, which has been taken over by another organization called Digital Promise. And Digital Promise now runs regular free Ed Camp sessions. I've spoken at those. But there's free opportunities to keep communicating. And because there's no one person who's going to make all the changes, and there's no one answer. It's all about sharing. It's all about this exact experience. And so keep talking to each other. That's my advice.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure that you need my advice, because I just want to say thanks to all the teachers out there that are like ducks, right? You're smooth and cool on the top, and you are just paddling underneath there. I've seen the behind the scenes. It's busy. I guess it's really knowing your students and taking the time to know them and do what you can to work with them, support them, and help them continue to learn and grow.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with Jessica one more time. But I totally agree with Jessica that I'm not sure I really have like advice to say, because you're already doing like great things in the classroom. I guess one kind of thought or provocation is, particularly when we're incorporating technology in the classroom, like how can we not make it about the tech? And like instead think about like how can it be more like a complementary ingredient rather than like the centerpiece of everything? Like what Godwyn is doing with paper, I love that, because it's just like why can't we have like physicality and touch activated in learning when we're not in the same place? So just like thinking less about tech as the cornerstone and thinking about it as like a complementary ingredient that can help sort of connect and make things visible to people, but is not the centerpiece of what we're doing.
Absolutely. And I think all of you made very strong points. And one point I will actually like to highlight is that this idea that the teachers who are at our conference today have spent since 9 a.m. they've been here, or 10 a.m. they've been here listening to all of these talks, sharing discussions with their teachers. So it's really commendable that they spent all this time. And teachers really do build the future of the future generations, and they shape, I guess, like what our future world looks like. So thank you all, Glenn, Jessica, and Godwyn, for being here, as well as all the teachers who are in attendance. We really appreciate your support, and we hope that this conference was useful for you. And once again, thank you for the panelists for all your valuable insights.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you guys.
All right, thank you all of you. I'm gonna wait for 1 second while my colleague Nastasia joins, and I'll be doing a closing note with her. But I really want to thank all three of you, Jessica, Godwyn, and Glenn, for joining us today for the closing panel. I can vouch for all the chat messages that are coming in saying thank you. I can personally say that this was a really, really insightful, and I feel like it was also a good blend of insights from people who had 3 different types of teaching backgrounds. So I personally thought it was really, really interesting.
You don't need me, right?
We needed you in the close until the close panel, but now we're going to deliver a closing note. So yes, you can hop off, but we still encourage you to stay for the closing ceremony.
But you don't need me on screen.
Yeah. No.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye, Godwyn.
Okay, cool. Aryan, do you want to share then?
Mm-hmm. All right. I hope everyone can see my screen. This is going to be a short closing note because I know it's been a really long day for everyone. We just wanted to thank all of you for staying here, for listening to all the talks, all the workshops, and the panel. And we just wanted to remind you for a great day it's been for us as a team and for all of you, I hope, as well. And just remind you of a few closing logistics before we let you all go. So I want to first ask a quick question just to get everyone's sense of what you thought was the favorite part of the event, what we should do better, what we should do less of. I'd make a small request if people can drop your favorite part of the event in the chat. I'll try to read off a couple of the chat messages and just get a sense of what people's favorite parts were. Well, it seems like Brent in general thought that the whole event was good and the session in particular was fantastic. Thank you so much, Brent. I'm going to wait a few more seconds to see what people say. Robin really liked the speed networking, which has also been one of my favorite parts. Personally, didn't get a chance to network with other teachers, but I hope you all enjoyed it. Catherine said that the panelists were really good. Thank you, Catherine, for thanking our team as well. Stephen felt that all of the different ideas that were presented was his favorite part of the event. And Joan personally enjoyed Richard's presentation the most. I also thought Richard Rusick's presentation and talk was the most inspiring thing I've heard in a long time. Even though I'm not really a teacher, I felt like the whole discussion on raising problem solvers instead of high test scores, I think it was an important thing to underscore for some of us who've actually been primed to be high test scores instead of problem solvers. All right, I'm going to move on. Here are some couple of screenshots just to remind you of some of the highlights of the event. We had Rohit delivering an impromptu talk, and that was very impromptu, so we're all really proud of him. I hope you enjoyed his talk on robotics. Here's a screenshot from Brandon's workshop on the CST. I hope some of you had a chance to listen to kit-based learning. And here's a screenshot from Regina's talk as well, how she used the Ignite STEM grant to teach students coding drones for the first time. And finally, I have a screenshot of Richard and Jason moderating the Q&A, as well as Rohit and Tejas talking about the solution for a grocery bot. They also had a grocery truck solution, which I heard got some turn around some heads a lot. So moving on to some verbatims from the event, we have a couple of them. I'm going to read off maybe one or two. Richard said, "You have to fail. It's part of the process." Jared, in particular, said, this last year wasn't a lost year. It was a found year where people really found what they were inclined towards. Godwyn Morris just said, "Ask and listen, don't just tell." I'll leave on this slide for a few seconds. We'll also share the closing slides if you want to check out the screenshots of the verbatims later. And finally, some of the great ideas that we heard. From the Festival of Ideas, Team 8 suggested digital lab notebooks, recording lessons, integration of office hours. Team 9 suggested a wide day, and Team 16 suggested a student choice in what you want to do, whether it's practice or instructional assessments. And Team 21 suggested something similar to Richard Rusick, was offering students free time in the middle of the day. There's a lot of other great ideas that we heard. We will send you all an email to source the presentations that you made, and we'll hopefully make a Google Drive of them or some other digital folder and then share it all with you. Now I'm going to pass it along to Nastasia, who will talk about the other slides remaining.
So I think we just want to give a really special thank you to all of our speakers, all of our panelists, all of our attendees, the whole team, and also all of our Ed Talk speakers. You guys all did an amazing job, and it was really great to meet everyone and hear your ideas and just kind of be able to communicate in this way, even in this virtual setting. Next slide. So then just some final closing logistics. So watch out for our final email with your PD certificate and also some fun stats for today. We'll also link the newsletter and website in the email, but if you want to get a head start and sign up for a newsletter or check out the website for our previous conferences and resources, feel free. And then
hopefully the link should be easy to remember, because the first one is just pay.ly/ignite newsletter. The second one is just ignitestem.org. And yeah, Nastasia, you can go back.
Oh yeah, so then we're also going to send out an Airtable in the email because we noticed a lot of you had a lot of fun like talking to each other and kind of meeting new people. So we're hoping that if you guys wanted to opt in, we could connect you with contact information from other conference attendees and maybe make like a big resource table for everyone so you can continue ideating, etc. And also we're going to send out everyone's slides, all the Ed Talk speakers, etc. because they're really great. And also all the highlights. And we're just generally really excited to see the classroom of the future. So then please just fill out the feedback form if you can. It's on the stage. If you click on type form once this event ends, that would be really great because we'd love to hear your feedback so we can continue making events like this.
I would actually suggest, since we're not doing any chat or Q&As right now, you're all on the stage. If you just press the type form, now that the event has officially ended, I would just recommend all of you to start the type form. It's easier to do it right here and hop in instead of just opening the type form again in the email. So as we close out and leave the slide open for one last minute, we hope that you stick on for 2 extra minutes and just take this feedback form quickly. It's just three simple questions, 3 really short questions, and it really helps us make our events better.
And then just generally, thank you so much for joining us again. We can't say thank you enough, and we're really excited for future events and to continue working with you. And yeah, if you post anything, feel free to use the hashtag that we created.
Thank you so much. We hope that you all had a great day and look forward to seeing some of you hopefully in person soon.
Bye, everyone.